Hey guys, Level Cap here, and today we have an episode of Loadout, the series where you guys, the viewers, get to pick a gun and customization for me to use. The way you do this is you leave a comment down below, letting me know what kind of weapon and accessories you'd like me to run with, and I will pick one of the top rated comments for the next episode. Today's top comment comes from Ace Gaming 23, who says the German Rifleman will be using the Gewehr 98 with the bayonet attached. Then we'll have the Po8 pistol for the sidearm. Any gadget I want. Standard frag grenade, will be using the shovel for melee. Hope you picked my suggestion. Been a fan since the release of Battlefield 4. And thank you Ace Gaming for your comment and your continued support of my channel. I had a feeling we were going to be doing a bunch of these sort of authentic soldier loadouts from the time period, and this is definitely something you would have seen a German infantryman running with, is the Gewehr 98 with iron sights. And they wouldn't have necessarily had a sidearm, but if they did, the Po8's a pretty likely candidate. Now as for gadgets, I went with the tripwire bomb and the flare gun. I don't think I'll ever not pick the flare gun for the scout class. It is just so insanely useful, both defensively, offensively, for spotting people and even lighting them on fire or cutting off a mode of access to a house from them. Because if you have a flare there, you know, it's kind of like having a mini incendiary grenade that's only harder to see. And then I am using the high explosive tripwire bomb. There's other versions, gas incendiary versions of these bombs. I like the high explosive one as it gives you the biggest chance of getting a kill, I think. And it won't do 100% damage. I think it would be a little bit too powerful if it did that, but it'll at least let you know if somebody's coming into a building that you might be held up in, or it will finish off a kill. So they're very useful defensively, not so much offensively, unless you get pushed onto a point and then you want to push to another point. You can put a tripwire bomb there to try and take care of somebody who comes back to that point. But ultimately, they're much more valuable as a defensive gadget. Now let's talk a little bit about this Gewehr 98 infantry model. The infantry model gives you the iron sights, but does it change anything else about the weapon? Well, it gives it slightly better recoil recovery, which I think on a bolt action is borderline useless. It's not really much of an advantage. So really, the difference between the infantry version and say the sniper version is not getting a 8x sniper scope and instead trying to snipe with the iron sights. Now granted, I kind of like the iron sights on this rifle. They do look cool, but this weapon is all about getting headshots or hitting people at the sweet spot range. And this has got a pretty darn far away sweet spot range, going from 80 meters out to 125-ish meters, and that's something that's going to be very tricky to use with an iron sight rifle. You're going to have much better luck with an 8x scope hitting somebody at that distance. And the more I learn about weapon stats in Battlefield 1, the more I'm a bit confused by the iron sight options for sniper rifles. They don't really seem to provide much, if any, of a benefit whatsoever. Now, using scopes are great and all, but I would give up a scope if there was some cool benefit to not having it. For example, the Gewehr 98 has an incredibly long-range damage model, but what if it also allowed me to one-shot somebody who is extremely close to me, or had a different close-range damage model for the iron sight version of this weapon? It would give you a different reason to pick this gun over the one with the scope, because if you're using this to try and hit long-range targets, there's practically no use to picking it over the scope version. Iron sights are going to be harder to hit headshots, harder to hit moving targets, harder to hit body shots at those further ranges. At the moment, the only reason to pick this incredibly common and authentic feeling weapon for a World War I game is for nostalgic purposes. I mean, this gun doesn't give you any advantage over the scoped version, so there isn't really much of a reason to use it whatsoever. So I feel like DICE is just relying a lot on people's desire to try and make this game feel more authentic when they're playing it. Otherwise, they're just not going to be using a lot of the more common weapons that were probably seen during the war. And I think DICE might have missed a bit of an opportunity there to try and balance the iron sight weapons in a way to actually give them a stat advantage over the ones with scopes. That way, if you want a scope for more precise aiming at long range, you might have to sacrifice something in the damage model area where the iron sight version has a slightly better damage model or something. I mean, there's a lot of different routes you could go with balancing weapons, but I definitely think the iron sight weapons need something better than just slightly better recoil recovery. So really, for the most part, it doesn't just apply to the Gewehr 98 Po8 Infantry model, but any of the sniper rifles with iron sights I think could use some sort of stat improvement. And if you are using them and enjoying them, you might actually be doing a lot better with one with a scope. Obviously, you're not going to have that scope lint when sniping it far away, but not being able to shoot headshots precisely with the iron sights is going to be a tough sale. Now, as for the Po8 Sidearm, I like the nostalgic element of this sidearm. It's a cool looking handgun. The problem I have with it is that it's just simply outclassed by weapons like the M1911. It's got like the exact same rate of fire as the M1911, except the M1911 does 35 damage in close quarters, allowing you to 3-shot somebody, where the Po8 does 30 damage in close quarters, requiring you to have a 4-shot on somebody. Also, its damage drop-off isn't particularly great, so a lot of the time if you shoot somebody with the bolt action, a body shot in close quarters, and you need to finish them off with the Po8, it won't always be a 1-shot. Also, thanks to the sort of forearm damage model, if you hit that by accident and you get the 60 damage in close quarters, you're going to need to hit them at least twice with the Po8, creating a fairly long time to kill and not a fast finish up kill. So the Po8 is a fun little sidearm, but even as a sniper's sidearm, I don't think it's particularly good. You'd be better off with the M1911, probably the Frommerstopp, or even like the Mars Automatic. All of those would be great follow-up weapons to any sort of single-shot rifle. But the Po8, despite it being a fun and cool-looking gun, is just really outclassed by most of the weapons in the game. Now, I think we're at the point where I can kind of convey that this is not a particularly great loadout. It can be fun and it can feel cool and more authentic, despite my kind of stripy camo on the Gewehr 98. But you're not going to do too well with it. So in order to try and maximize your kills or maximize your effectiveness, I would recommend keeping your distance with this weapon. It's not going to do you any favors in close quarters, no more than a scoped rifle would. And you can basically serve as like a mobile spawn point for your squad mates, which is very valuable. You can see here I've taken some high ground. I was even putting down tripwire bombs by the ladders to keep people from coming up and killing me, or at least alerting me. Basically, you just want to put yourself in a position where someone with a shotgun isn't going to get in your face, or an SMG or an LMG. You want as much of the advantage as possible with this weapon. It is not forgiving in the wrong situation. And you'll see that in a clip coming up here, where I'm just going to be body shotting the heck out of people, landing shots left and right, but not getting any kills from it. So even though the quick body shot with this rifle is one of the better or easier things to do with it, it's not particularly well rewarded, and Amiens is not an easy map to use this setup. I mean, it can be okay with a scoped rifle if you're playing at the right distances, but without that scope, you'll often find yourself in the front lines, and you can't really do much. Also, relying on the Po8 to get kills in close quarters is not exactly fun when you're up against just about any other weapon out there. I feel much more capable with something like the 1911. Now you can see here I'm in what would be an ideal situation to try and support my teammates, and I'm just getting shot after shot after shot. There we go, I finally get a body shot kill, but I landed pretty much every shot I made there and only got one kill, just because this gun is not going to do enough damage in medium range, and without a scope on there, it's going to be too tricky to aim for those headshots, or you really have to practice aiming at headshots with iron sights. The problem for going for headshots with iron sights is that once you aim the iron sight right at head level, the post itself is kind of blocking most of their body, so it's actually hard to sort of track a target or be aware of what they're doing. So hitting a stationary target with a headshot isn't difficult, but as soon as they start moving, the iron sight becomes a whole different world and much more difficult to aim with. Now, of course, I'm playing some Operations here, Amiens still being one of my favorite maps of all time, and Operations such a great game mode because it really creates a frontline mechanic for the most part. It does break down on certain maps in certain areas for fun factor, but having front lines is great for snipers because you don't have to worry about people sneaking up behind you at weird angles. You don't have weapons that are good for sort of whipping around and getting a quick kill. In fact, you're the worst class in the game for that. You're all about setting up the long range kill and being very aware of what's going on in the environment around you. You have to be in order to stay alive. Anyway, that does pretty much wrap it up for today's episode of Loadout. If there's one message to leave you with, it's that the authentic loadouts are the ones that best represented the infantry classes of each army are probably going to be some of the lesser effective loadouts in this game. So if you want to go authentic, you're probably going to be sacrificing your KDR, but you might make up for it in the role-playing factor if that's your thing. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave your comments down below for next week's episode, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing out.